powwow circuit and all that, trying to just understand, what the nuances were and all that. I noticed that a lot of people were looking for that Western Plains sort of look, and I'm sure we can all relate to that. So we wanted to do something that was highlighting us and who we are. And President Nancy Cariulo, former president at Rhode Island College, was very supportive.
Wow.
There was one by the name of Jen Giroux that I developed a great relationship with. And they just started us off with our New England Native American Culture Week, which of course culminated in the Big Drum Powwow, which will be this weekend. Thus far this week, we've done 2 events on Monday, and it was great to see some faces there as well. On Monday, we did our Walking in Two Worlds panel discussion, which featured Kathy Sperry Dancer Crippen, Eugene First Bear Montero, and George Spring Buffalo. I think it's George Spring Buffalo Spring. But just talking about kind of how they navigate contemporary society and their traditional cultural beliefs. Tuesday, we did our Nicomo Drum Social and Potluck, which was very good. There was lots of food. Thank you everyone who brought something. Cooked or shared. It was delicious. And then tonight, we're on to our 3rd and final educational event of the week, which is a little something I put together just called Providence's Indian History. And I did this in particular because this is where my own personal roots, as far as the Indian stuff goes, right here to Providence. My family moved up off of the res late 1800s. Just been up here like 6 or 7 generations, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But also because I find that when I go around and talk to people, most people associate the Indians with down in South County. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just say, well, yeah, but there's Indians up here too. There's Indians all over the place if you know what you're looking for. And I really wanted to kind of touch base on that with this presentation. I did get a little bit of seed funding earlier this year from the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities. I told them that there were certain sites around the city of Providence that I wanted to do a little bit more research on and kind of be able to raise awareness about it. And it ties into overall work that I'm doing with my company that was started with my fellowship that I'll get to in a moment. But that's really what the purpose of today's presentation is, and I'm calling it a presentation. It's not a lecture, it's not any of that. This is just stuff that I found out. And what I'm really hoping is that in addition to perhaps maybe informing a few people about a couple things maybe they didn't know, someone will know something that they can inform me about. Ultimately, this project is going to transform itself into some sort of documentary. There's a gentleman who's on his way right now named Michael Lasende. So he and I have been supposed to be doing a doc for about 2 years now. And the idea is just kind of coming together. So this is going to be a part of it. And it's really just an historical overview of the Indigenous legacy of Rhode Island's capital city, which is Providence, which we're here today. Am I making sense so far?
Yes, you
I'm sorry, I was up to 5 o'clock the other night, 4 o'clock last night, so I'm happy this day is here. So just starting a little bit about the Providence Cultural Equity Initiative. That is the business that I was speaking about. It is a cultural agency, and we view our role as being the stewards of the cultural sector and economy for the state. So it's not just for Indian folk, because there's plenty of them doing that, but really just kind of being an institution that can say, hey, look, there's all of this fantastic cultural resources and cultural experts and cultural practitioners around, and you all should really know about them. You all should be finding ways to engage with them appropriately, but also you should be seeing them as a viable part of your economy. Because that's not how they look at culture a lot. They treat culture in the same vein that they try to treat art a lot of times. A lot of times when they think about art, they think about it as something that they'll do if they have the opportunity. So our goal is really to change that mindset, to get people looking at culture as the state's greatest untapped natural resource. And of course, if culture is the resource, then we're all the resource. And they should start looking at us like that. So PCI came out of my ongoing efforts just to kind of balance my social justice and community activism work with raising awareness about Indigenous cultures here in the city and state. And I got a fellowship back in 2016 from the Rhode Island Foundation to kind of help to do that on a statewide level. So Providence Indians, and I put this there because, as I mentioned, since my family came up off the reservation, we've been here in Providence. So I really think that this is Uncle Ed, but I keep hearing that it's Grandpa Brister. So I'm going to go with that as Grandpa Brister. But Brister Michael is one of the chiefs during the 1881 detribalization. The gentleman to his left is his son, Edward Michael, who was the brother to my third great grandmother, who was Sarah Jane Michael. And he was Chief Sunset. And he was up here on the east side of Providence. If you know where University Heights is at, that's where he lived at. That's where he did most of his stuff at. Underneath that is my great-great-grandmother, Alice Michael Cross. She married John Willis Surrey Cross, and they had Mary Jane Cross, who married a John Johnson. And then once they separated, married a John Cardozo, who was a Cape Verdean gentleman, who lived once again on the east side. John Johnson and Mary Jane Johnson at the time had 4 children, one of them being my grandmother, Alice Johnson, who married a gentleman by the name of Raymond Watson, who I don't have in this picture, but to my great surprise, and after arguing that no, it wasn't true with several members of the tribe, come to find out that her husband, Raymond Watson, I guess might have been the illegitimate child of Chief George Dreadpox Watson. So it was 2 lines connecting there. And I was arguing against it for years, but they kept telling me, no, that's his father. So eventually I was like, okay, well, if everyone keeps saying it, then obviously. My grandmother and my grandfather then had my mother, who had me. And then we have my lovely daughter there in the back that my wife and I had. So, but all up here in the Providence area. So growing up, it was kind of interesting to always have everyone focusing down South County because I was like, well, hey, you know, we're up here. So there are Providence Indians, and it goes just beyond me and my direct line. These are extended family members. These are my grandmother's 12 grandchildren. That's my daughter and my 2 nieces. That's my grandmother and her youngest brother, my grandmother and her daughters. This is my grandmother's grandmother, Alice Michael, and her husband, John Willis Surrey. He's from down out of South Carolina, but I'm hearing that he's from the crosses up here. So I don't know what's going on, but once again, Indians everywhere. And those are just other individuals around my mother and my 2 brothers and myself. And of course, it doesn't stop there, because this isn't just past stuff, this is contemporary stuff. This is from the powwow we were doing downtown, and that, of course, is former Mayor Angel Tavares. So the point being, there are Indians in Providence. They've been here, they're going to be here, and it's good for us to know about them, especially if we're here in these lands that they're now calling Providence. So let's just start off then, since we're talking about Providence, with some basic demographics, right? So we're all on the same plane. And of course, Providence was founded in 1636. It's the capital of the state of Rhode Island. It's a population of about 180,000 residents by census.gov. It's 20.6 square miles in area. It lies in Providence County at the head of Narragansett Bay on the Providence River. It's a seaport and industrial and commercial center. It is the focus of a metropolitan area that includes Pawtucket, East Providence, Central Falls, Cranston, Warwick, and Woonsocket. And it is supposedly the birthplace of freedom and religion, right? That's what they tell us all at Roger Williams. So that's a snapshot of Providence. But of course, we know Providence wasn't always like this, right? Because there was a time when there was a colonial Providence. And I did in this what I hear is like a cardinal rule to not do in presentations, which is to have a lot of wording up there. But I wasn't trapping all that in my brain. So I put a bunch of stuff up here. These are just a couple of quotes. This first one is just from Britannica.com. Providence was founded in 1636 by Roger Williams, who had been banished from Mass Bay Colony for his unorthodox religious beliefs. Him and 5 other dissenting companions canoed along the Mashasset River to what is now College Hill and found a freshwater spring, and that's a very, squashed presentation of what happened. In the spring of 1636, Williams obtained from Canonicus and Miantonomi a tract of land lying between Pawtucket and Pawtucket, where the Seacon rivers, on which, in the company of a few fellows, he founded the town of Providence. That's how the Sachems of the Narragansetts, page 14, which is an excellent read if you do get the chance to pick that book up. And then, final quote, this land was given by the Sachems to Williams on account of their friendship for him and was not looked upon as a sale. Now that's very important because they'll always see it. If you read a lot of stuff, they're going to write, oh, they bought it from him, he deeded it to them, and none of that is true. it was a conveyance. And the way that is explained, it's back in the day, they would have all of the people and they'd be living on the church's lands, right? And the church would say, oh, you can stay over there near the great oak tree. You can live off of it, you can do wherever. So he let them live there. And as Canonicus and Williams were accustomed constantly to exchange gifts of all sorts, each giving whatever the other at that time needed or desired without any thought of the cost or value. So once again, it was not considered a sale. It was, hey, yeah, you're my friend. You can use that space over there. And that's going to make more sense as we go along. This one other quote. This is from A History of New England with particular reference to the denomination of Christians called Baptists. This is Roger Williams. Notwithstanding, and it's funny, I'm going to read this first and then I'm going to point out to where they usually start the quote from. So, notwithstanding, I had the frequent promise of my antinomy that it should not be land that I should want about those bounds mentioned, provided that I satisfied the Indians there inhabiting, having made covenant of peaceable neighborhood with all the sachems and natives round about us, and having, in a sense of God's merciful providence, unto me in my distress, called the place Providence. I desired it might be for a shelter for persons distressed or conscious. Now, if you look up this quote, they're most likely going to start it right after Indians there inhabiting. Because once again, if there's Indians there inhabiting, then how did he sell the land to you? So they usually started from right here. Having made covenant of peaceable neighborhood with all the sachems, and then they're going to go on to tell you that they purchased the land. But just wanted to put that up there. And I'm keeping this map here, right, because this is what we understand Providence to look like today. But of course, we know what Providence wasn't always like this. I mean, what if we just go back, 2019, almost 2000. Let's go back a little over 100 years, 120, 125, and see what Providence might look like. 1850. This was created for the State Planning Board in 1936, and it was adapted from the Cushing-Walling map. And as you can see, I mean, this is Meshapog Pond down here, so we know there's tons of development down there by now. But it was all mainly on the east side and in some of the areas downtown. And this was in 1850. Let's go back another 100 years from there. See what it looks like in 1750. Really nothing. This is before the Revolution. This is less than 100 years after King Philip's War. You do see some roads starting to come down to Neshanticut Road and Greenwich Middle. But even 75 years after the King Philip's War, they still hadn't ventured too far off of that general track that they were originally given. And then if we just go 50 years before that, this is just 25 years after the King Philip's War. There's really nothing that they've developed down in this area. Nothing. And that, of course, is because this was all Indian territory. This was all the Indians, there was Indians everywhere, all around. This one was created for the State Planning Board, and it shows the town bounds included all of Providence as of 1938 west of the Blackstone River. And that's what all of these lines down here are. But once again, as you can see, in 1700, none of that land is developed. So which means all of this around here was just in woods and rivers and beauty and all that good stuff. So just to get an understanding that the way that we perceive things now is not the way that they always have been in these years. And I know we know that, but just wanted to harp on that point for it. And of course, if Providence didn't look the way that it looks right now, then of course, the state didn't look the way that it looks right now. So I really like this map. This was created by Sidney S. Ryder in 1903, and he published it in a book called The Lands of Rhode Island, as they were known to Canonicus and my antinomy when Roger Williams came in 1636, an Indian map of the principal locations known to the Narragansetts, and elaborate historical notes. It gives the Indian names of locations and the locations of great events in Indian history with present political divisions. So up here you're going to see the numbering of all of the different towns and cities throughout the state. And you see a little number. And then you're going to see a dotted line that shows where those places would be. But then laid over the top of that, you're going to see Narragansett, Aquidneck, Niantic, Shawomet. So it shows you where the actual places were, where the people were, prior to European colonization. And it really helps you to orient yourself to the fact that, wait, we were all over the place. We were all over the place. From my understanding, Shawomet was just as large as the village town in Narragansett. Just as many people up in Shawomet. And it made sense to me because I would always want to know how Roger Williams and Canonicus created such a good friendship. And Canonicus was way down in the bottom of the state all the time and there's no cars. I mean, you're not just, it's not like today where we just hop in and half an hour we're there and we're still complaining.
It has open.
So you got to find out that you need to go up there. You need to make sure that, so it's a whole different realm. So clearly our people were all throughout the state. And this right here was entered according to Act of Congress in the Office of the Librarian of Congress at Washington. So this is an official, they've said, yeah, this is legitimate. So this is by their, yes.
So I would not be to make notes over here. Can I get a copy of your presentation?
Yeah, I think that would be, yeah. So in the lands of Rhode Island, he goes on to explain that the number of villages of or under the dominion of the Nahegans is of particular note, as well as it is seldom discussed in contemporary narratives of the aboriginal presence of the inhabitants of Rhode Island. So there was Mushasik, which was in Providence, Chibachusa, Prudence Island, Aquidneck, Cucumsequessock, and I don't want to go through all of that, but just look at all of the different names of places where the people were living.
Where do those names come from?
Just out of the language, and they were usually naming it for a lot of times what it was. So Massachusetts, from what I understand, is people of the Blue Hills. We come from there. Now again, it's the people of the small point. So clearly there was a small point where they were saying this is where we come from. And it was in our language, according to our customs and to what we saw them as. And I'm sure that what's always interesting to me is that a lot of these names you're going to see if you ride around today, like Cohasset. How many times do we ride through Cohasset? And do we think about the fact that that was a village where people were living? And a well-known one, because I've heard about it in a few different historical documents and stuff like that. There's so many different villages where people were living that were indigenous to these lands.
A lot of parks, a lot of streets, so they still have the same name.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's...
So I'm going to take it a step further. Let's jump back to Providence, right? So if we know that these places aren't based off of the communities and neighborhoods we know today, then what were they? And these are what I am promoting as the 6 different areas of what we call now today Providence during indigenous times, before the Europeans got here. This is based off of different maps, different historical accounts, describing what the lands look like. But as you can see, the orange part was a good portion of it, and that was Asapumsik. And I could be wrong. Some of these could be off. I'm sure when you get down into the red, blue, and orange area where it connects, I'm sure that was not what I have up there, but this was just my general sort of to get the thoughts going. Of course, Mashipag, which means a large pond. Masha, or Masi, Massasoit, great leader, Masha, so big. Mashipag, an Og is usually a place, so it's a big pond. Mushasik, the moose hunting grounds, which is in the yellow area that you see on this map. And then Nunakunkanet, at the short stamp boundary mark.
No, not right now.
Pamanganset, which is a place of tribute associated with Mashipag. And then Tupwoden, which is a steep ascent to the climb. And these places right here are going to be the areas that we're going to focus on tonight when we talk about the different things that have happened in Providence in terms of its indigenous history. But this map will keep coming back and forth, dropping up different colors and things of that nature. But these are the basic territories is what I'm going to call them. Not neighborhoods, not even communities, but territories. Because we know if you have 300, 400 people in a village, right? Everyone's not going to just stay around. It's not like the cities now where we just cramped all together all the time. I'm going out to enjoy this lovely wilderness that's here, right? And this is the general territories where we feel comfortable going to. To the south of where you see Mashipag would have been the villages of the Tuxet, and also Chalatik where Aguantis was, and further south than that, Shawamet. Up to the northeast, the Pawtucket Indians are up that way. And then if you go northwest, you're getting into Nipmuc territories with Wanskuck, which is the lowlands, and then up above that, Massachusetts and all that sort of stuff. So Once again, just focusing on Providence, and that's what I'm promoting, and I could very well be wrong, but that's what my understanding is thus far based upon what I've been researching. So let's start with this, our story off with this place called NENACW Hill. And I could sit here and do some rambling like I've been doing, but I don't want to do that because we were able to participate in something last weekend, I think, with the NENACW Hill Conservancy. And I think it'll do a much better job of explaining. It is me talking, but I'm in character at the time. So, and as you can see, proposing that NENACW was this general area here with that black dot. That's where I'm saying the village was, up in that area somewhere. We've been invited up there to come and check on that a little bit. But let me just let this run.
Is this wonderful peak, and as history tells it, one of the grand sages of the Nahegans by the name of my Antononi, who happened to be the nephew of my great-grandfather Tanakis, stood on this peak here because there were ongoing issues taking place between the colonists who had just moved in following Roger Williams and the people from three separate villages, the Tuxet, which is a little bit over in the Cranston area, NENACW Hill right here, and then the Mashipog villages, which is where my people come from. And we have other members that are here as well.
The land that the Europeans were told that they could use for their livelihood, but remember, Roger Williams said with the Indians inhabiting it already. So which means, yeah, they could use that, but they would be sharing it with other Indians that would be going down there to use the lands as well. So that was my Antonomi's conveyance. So that's where we start with NENACW. There was a village there. They were having disagreements about the fact that these Europeans were using these lands along with Meshipog and along with Patuxet. They were ready to go to war. So Roger Williams is Canonicus' friend. Antonomi go tell them where they can stay at. Now, the reason that they even had to have that conversation, of course, was because Roger Williams had gotten kicked out of Mass Bay Colony. And he first made his way to the other side of the river, over into the Poconoke territory, which is also known as Tahooten. What happened was, as he was there on the other side, the governor of Mass Bay sent him communication telling him that if you're on that side of the river, you're still in Mass Bay Colony's jurisdiction, perhaps you should consider going to the other side. So it's very interesting that even though these aren't their lands, they're conveying jurisdiction over them and telling other people, well, you can't be here, and it's the Massasoit that told him he could stay there. So contemporarily, of course, this space that we know as Tahooten, the territory, which is the green area that I'm proposing, is now known as India Point and Fox Point. So that would be the original name for those areas, and lo and behold, I was down in that area as well. Family was down in that area. So I'm sure some of us have a lot of family members who came from out of that area too. Yes. So at Tahooten is not only where this village was, and not only where this space was, but of course it was the place where Roger Williams' landing is. And right now, once again, if you're familiar with this space, this is in a small park that's on the corner of Gano and William Street. But at the time when Roger Williams landed there, that was all water going down to the Seekonk River. So there was no Gano Street. There was none of that. The water came up to here. So they have this landing down there, and Tahooten has the very distinct, honor of being the territories that actually began what we could argue is definitely the state of Rhode Island, but arguably this thing called the U.S., because it prides itself on its freedom of democracy and freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Well, none of that takes place if the Narragansetts decide to kick Roger Williams back into the boat when he comes off of the river. But of course, that's not what happened. Instead, what happened was that famous line that they always like to give, "What cheer Nita," right? And they say that it was a mix of the English greeting, "What cheer," and Nita, friend. So, what's going on, friend? And if you go around the monument, these are the four sort of plaques you'll see on it. The one to the far left being Roger Williams coming out of the boat and the Narragansetts reaching out to greet him. The next plaque reads, "To the memory of Roger Williams, the apostle of the soul, liberty, founder of the state of Rhode Island and Providence plantations. This monument is dedicated by the Providence Association of Mechanics and Manufacturers in 1906. Another side says, below this spot, then at the water's edge, stood the rock on which, according to tradition, Roger Williams, in exile for his devotion to freedom of conscience, landed. And very interesting story, I heard that they somehow, in trying to honor that rock, blew it up. Blew it up 30, 40 years ago. Blew the rock up. Said it was a mistake. Yeah, they were supposed to be honoring, and somehow someone used too much of something and the whole rock blew up. Very interesting stories, how our things that let people know we were here happen to get blown up a lot. And then the last one, in having a sense of God's merciful providence unto me, in my distress called the place Providence. I desired it might be for a shelter to persons distressed for conscience. And that's the quote that I gave earlier. And of course, the sale of the city of Providence with the wet chair knee top, once again, Roger Williams coming off. And once again, here's the quote again. Notwithstanding, I had the frequent promise of my antinomy that it should not be land that I should want about those bounds mentioned, provided that I satisfied the Indians there inhabiting. So they've incorporated this whole relationship with Takwooten into the sale of the city of Providence, but you never hear about Takwooten or the village there, or the fact that it was the Indians who helped Roger Williams, not the other way. So Roger Williams comes off the boat. He's in Takwooten now. He's in the area, and he now, my antinomy has to come and give the word of where he can stay. Why? Well, I mentioned it earlier, because the chiefs from Meshipog, Patuxet, and New Company were not having it. They were not happy. They did not want these Europeans here. That was Roger Williams' friend. That was not our friend. This actually led down the lines to a political separation that's been going on in the Narragansett since 1643 between the southern territories and the northern territories, starting with Shawomet and North. So if you remember that rider map, the areas that Shawomet and North, Shawomet was under Pungham. And they didn't like the fact that my antinomy and Canonicus were giving away all of this land in the northern territories. So in 1643, they went over and put themselves under the jurisdiction of Plymouth Bay Colony, I believe, or Mass Bay Colony. And then that's when William Arnold tried to steal land and all of this craziness. So if you read that history of what was going on with the Arnolds in the 1600s, all of that was tied into deeds that they thought that they had gotten from Pungham and Sokononico. Sokononico was the chief of Patuxet. Pungham was the chief of Shawomet. And in between Meshipog and Shawomet, there was a village called Chabatik, who Aguantis was the chief of. Right next to the Meshipog area is the Pumagansett area, and that was an honoring space. It's down by the water, so probably for ceremony and those sorts of things going on in that space. And then the picture to the right is just a nice picture of Meshipog Pond, right over on the Providence-Cranston line. Once again, still there. Still there. This is what it looks like today. So just for a little bit of background on Meshipog, the city of Providence is located in the eastern portion of the state, and Meshipog Pond is located in the southern section of the city. Meshipog Pond is the largest freshwater lake in the city of Providence, and is located within an area locally known as Reservoir Triangle. So if we think about it, if Meshipog is and was the largest freshwater pond, then you can probably bet there were a lot of Indians around it, right? And indeed there was. Meshipog was one of the notable villages of the Northern Territories during the time of European contact. The pond is bordered by the city of Cranston to the west, Narragansett Avenue to the east, and St. Clair Avenue to the south. It receives freshwater inflow from Spectacle Pond, groundwater, and stormwater, and it provides the primary flow to the Roger Williams Park Pond system. It is bacteria impaired, and that has to do with a lot, and this all came out of the dem.ri.gov report. So all official accountings for Meshipog, but that's the general territory that I'm proposing for Meshipog. And then, in that dot right there, we have where the village is, right around the pond. This is a picture from the most recent naming ceremony we did over at the pond. They have a space over there called Murphy Trainer Park. Artie Crippen was there. I'm sure many of y'all know Artie and Miss Cat. And it's so interesting. So you hear there's this village, but you know, if you don't have that eye to see, then you don't see things. So while we're there, to the right over here is where the pond is. And Miss Cat, everything's open, we clean everything up. I'm walking past the car and she says, Raymond, come here. So I walk over and say, yes, Miss Cat. She says, you know those are burial mounds over there by the water, right? Now I've been trying to find these burial mounds. She says, Artie, go show him. He goes over right there. You can see right where they go over, right by the water. And Artie says, yeah, right by the water. Where else would they put it? So we're getting ready to start some things up there, but the point being, here's where the village area was. And this is a space where our people were inhabiting prior to and even throughout European contact. The sage of Ameshipak was Apatunawat. Apatunawat. And there's interesting history. Some say that he was put there by Massasoit. There's a lot of interesting dynamics in terms of the politics going on between Indians and chiefs, even to today. We know there's a lot of drama that happens today, so it's nothing new. This is what we've been doing. It's considered the border area of the Providence settlement in the area known as Nushasik. And the bounds of the original Providence settlement were given as from the rivers and fields of Pawtucket, the great hill of NENACW on the northwest, and the town of Mashipak on the southwest. And once again, this is from the lands of Rhode Island as they were known now. Notice Mashipak there is a boundary, right? Because I read somewhere, I think it was on Providence website, that they said that Mashipak was part of the original land that was given to Roger Williams. And why would the chiefs give Roger Williams and the Europeans a village where Indians are already living? So once again, you can just see how they mess all of this up. It was a sale, it was a deed, it was all of this craziness when none of it's true. This is actually, okay, so we have Mashipak, they're upset. They get ready to go to war along with Sokononiko from Pawtucket and the chief of NENACW, who I'm still trying to find out their name. My Antinomi comes and says, Roger Williams, you can live there. And the space where he tells him to live is Mushasik. So this is the yellow. That's why you're going to see whenever you look at the first settlements of Roger Williams, everything's pretty much going to be on this side of the river. And if you look at some of the older maps, you'll also notice that the river was a lot wider, and up here it broke into a cove. So this is a depiction of that. This would have been the side where Roger Williams would have been, and he would have been overlooking and seeing Indians once again everywhere. Indians, uncivilized savages, you know, who were just off running around half naked most of the time. And we were, you know, some fashion, but they, you know, we weren't stupid people, we weren't uncivilized people, and there was a lot more of us around than they'd like to tell us that there were. So this is a depiction of Mushasik, and of course this is the area where Roger Williams was told that he could go and live. But remember, other Indians inhabiting the space. So once again, we're still in our mindset of how we use the land. We all use it. These are, you know, you need to fish, you need to hunt, that's fine. But the European concept is, well, these are ours and you stay over there. So this is where a lot of the conflict's going to come out of, this clash of understanding in terms of what these lands, how these lands are supposed to be interacted with. And Mushasik is kind of ground zero for all of that. Because this is where Roger Williams is going to make his settlement, and this is where Providence and ultimately Rhode Island is going to start to grow and gain in strength. So this is another quote from under the auspices of the Rhode Island Historical Society. This is talking about a monument to Canonicus, which I'll get to later on, but I like the quote. It says, when Roger Williams, an exile and a wanderer, sought the banks of the Mushasik, he found the charity of the savage denizens of the wilderness, who professed nothing superior to that of his white persecutors, who professed to fear God, though not practicing his precepts. Notwithstanding his well-founded distrust of the English, Canonicus received the outcast with kindness, supplied his wants, and stayed his wanderings by conveying him land. Now they're even saying it there, it's a conveyance, it's not a sale. But he came and he wanted to be in this particular space in Mushasik, definitely because of the moose, definitely because of the fish and all that. But he wanted to be in Moshasik for a very specific reason. And that reason is this freshwater spring that's there. Now once again, if you're at the Roger Williams National Memorial and you come up the hill to the North Main Street side, you can see this funny little block here. And it says Roger Williams founded Providence here in 1636. But if you read the language to this one, and this is the flip side to the block, it says, the spring of clear cold water located 30 feet west of this point led Roger Williams to found Providence here in the year 1636, from which center has developed 4 directions. So he wanted to use that space in particular because there was a freshwater spring there. And of course, to our people, there was probably freshwater springs everywhere, right? Yeah, go right ahead, Roger. If you want to go use that space there, you'll be near the moose and you'll be near the fish and the ducks and all that. Go right ahead. And of course, they commemorated it with not only this, but this is the top view looking down on where the freshwater space is. And I'm not going to read that. I could have probably cleared it up, but I didn't. I didn't ask my wife to either. But you can go there, perhaps this weekend when you're at the pop-up and read what it says on there. And once again, it's talking about the freshwater spring that's there. And then this is what it looks like from the other side. A very, very nice and inviting location. They've got some nice shrubbery and all that sort of stuff. But the point being that this was the epicenter of where the state of Rhode Island really grew out of. And as we know, the state of Rhode Island, I believe, was the first to kind of separate from the British. So arguably, this is the site, like I was saying, where the U.S. began from, right here. This space right here. And as the Roger Williams National Memorial does such a good job at, they have a artistic depiction of the wellspring of Providence. As you can see, imagine that. You're terrified of these savages that are down by the water, but you need them though, right? Because it's their land and you don't know what you're doing. So you don't really want to engage with them. You will if you have to, but you don't really want to. And then, ta-da, here's this spring. There's springs everywhere else, but this is your spring. This is our spring now. So we don't even have to go and deal with these people. We can just get water from our spring. And that's why, in my opinion, it holds so much weight with them. Because if you look at it, it's just a spring, right? It's just a spring. They write, a freshwater spring attracted Roger Williams to this site and anchored the community. Williams built his house across the street, and religious and civil meetings took place around its gushing waters. The spring remained in community ownership until 1721. When the land around the spring was sold, the deed stipulated that liberty was reserved for the inhabitants to fetch water at said spring forever. As the city grew, however, the spring was eventually hidden under buildings. Finally, in the 1930s, the spring was uncovered and became the centerpiece of Roger Williams Spring Park. So I'm assuming the National Memorial was Roger Williams Spring Park before they turned it to the National Memorial. But once again, the beauty of the land, the sustenance of the land, and they had their own private spring. What more could they need in life? So once again, I say it's ground zero because this is also the place of Weybosset, and Weybosset is just a crossing. This is a contemporary picture of where the area of Weybosset would have looked like. If you look on the dot on the map there, it's going to be kind of where College Hill crosses the water and then it splits into Weybosset. And if you follow the map a little bit, you can see from the dot, you can actually just go straight up to Broad Street. So it's still Weybosset, still the same Weybosset. They're still acknowledging it as Weybosset, but they call it Weybosset because the tide would go in and out and it would get so low that you could cross on foot. So the crossing. So everyone knowing that the tide was low, you can cross this space here, probably pick the clams and all of that sort of good stuff. This is some more pictures of what it looks like now. As you can see, they're actually building a People's Bridge in the same area where Weybosset was. So they've had a tendency, I would say, European culture to kind of knock our stuff down and then later on just kind of redo what we did as Indigenous community. And here we see it happening again. And then this is just looking from the Weybosset towards the river. Gentlemen just happened to be in the picture. I was trying to take the picture and drive at the same time. But once again, this is just a general area that might have been Weybosset. Not quite sure exactly where it's at. But as you can see, it's a crossing point. So it's in Tagwatan territory. It's in Assapumpsic, and it's also very close to Moshasik. So there's a lot going on in terms of territorial interaction right in that area.
Isn't that the same area where they sold the slaves?
I'm gonna get to that in one more. I'm gonna get
What
to
is
that.
that?
And they even still call the street Weybosset, so that's why I took that picture. They still call it Weybosset. And the reason they call the street Weybosset is because, well, besides being located at a narrow place that Indians used to walk from one side of the bay to the other during low tide, it was south of the convergence of two rivers, Woonasquatucket and Woomashasset, but it was also where three native trails met. The one coming down from the north, and once again, because they just knock our stuff down and build on top of it, it is my sincere belief that it's just North Main Street and Route 1. The Indian Trail that was coming down from the north, because if you notice, it goes right down and then it curves, and then if you keep going straight, you get to that area where Weybosset's at. The second one being up from the southeast Mount Hope region called the Wampanoag Trail. So the Wampanoag Trail is meeting there, so 195 coming into Weybosset. And then up from Connecticut to southwest called the Pequot Trail, 95 south, or Route 1 going down. So once again, not much has changed. Just the names of it pretty much and some new stuff on top of it, but still following the same path that Indigenous folks set because it made sense. We did things that made sense. So for the Europeans, it doesn't make sense to try to reinvent the wheel. You just kind of replace it with whatever you're going to do there. But these are all Indian trails. North Main Street, Broad Street, 195 going, all Indian trails that they just still following through today. And of course, if you have people coming down from the north being Poconokics or Massachusetts, people coming from the east being Poconokics and tribes out there, people coming from the south being Pequots, this is all going to have a lot of Indian activity in it. Because once again, the moose are there, the salmon's there, the duck, the geese, it's a big field. Assapumpsic was known as the Great Meadow. It was also known as a hemp gathering place as well, where they would make ropes and things out of that nature. And Woomashasset is the moose hunting space. So you got the Great Meadow and the moose hunting place. And a point where three different Indian trails converge in one location. There's gonna be tons of Indian activity there. And of course, up in the settlement area, you have the Europeans who are coveting their gushing freshwater spring. Why is Weybosset also important? Well, to Tony's point, it was also where they were doing a lot of slavery from. Of course, this one is acknowledged in the African slave trade, this is the site, and this is right down near where they're building the People Bridge. The site of an 18th century seaport village where seafaring merchants participated in the African slave trade in the 20th century. This port was used by Cape Verdeans who came to live in America. This is another quote from Britannica. Providence was given impetus in 1680 when Pardon Tillinghast built a wharf that became a base for the thriving triangular trade in molasses, slaves, and rum between Africa, the West Indies, and the American colonies. But I wanted to put this plaque up in this information because what these don't talk about is the exorbitant amount of Indian slaves that were involved in that, especially after the Pequot Wars and then after the King Philip's War. I had a quote, I didn't bring it with me, but they talked about how they were literally being just sold out. There's a gentleman who teaches at Brown University named Limpet Fisher. He was arguing about 5 million Indian slaves sold into slavery, out of the Americas, into the Caribbean. And from research that I've seen by different orgs, one out of Harvard University, less than 400,000 African slaves brought to the continental U.S. So the number of African slaves brought to the lands have been highly exaggerated, and the number of Indian slaves sold out into the Caribbean has been highly under-exaggerated. And this is why we see large, quote-unquote, Wampanoag communities in Bermuda, some to the Jamaicas, they call themselves the Maroons down there, and in Barbados as well. So much so that in 1676, Barbados passed an act prohibiting the importation of New England Indians. Because what was happening was we just came out of the King Philip's War, they're shipping us down to Barbados, we're going down there linking up with the Indians down there, and now they're revolting. So they just didn't want anything to do with the New England Indians. But that just gives you an idea of how many of us were being shipped out, and it was definitely being used from the same space. Well, we don't want you in this space. What else do we think is going to happen? You're telling Indians from all different tribes who have been here for thousands of years that now, because you were conveyed this space, they can no longer come there. And then further than that, you're venturing out because the space that you have isn't enough. So not only do you not want them in your space now, your space, but you also want more and more of their space, right? And that's why I keep saying that I believe, at least for Rhode Island, this was ground zero for really what happened, not only for, well, definitely for the U.S., but for our people in general, because out of this space in Rhode Island is where the power is growing out of and where they really start to kind of lock themselves in. Of course, still being friendly with Connecticut and my antinomy, a lot of the things that probably should have been stopped, hindsight's 2020, right, weren't. So you have this base that eventually grows to the state of Rhode Island and all of the other stuff that happens. But absolutely, if they're sitting right there smack dab in everyone's hunting ground telling people that you can't come in here anymore because it's mine, there's going to be conflict, and ultimately that ends up culminating in the King Philip's War, and colonization kind of kicks in after that, slavery and all of that sort of good stuff, and we start getting into really where we're at now. So that's some of the colonial sort of relationship that indigenous people have with the lands. I wanted to talk about this in a more contemporary fashion. This is going to be around late 1800s, early 1900s, and this is Canonicus Rock. And this is really interesting. This comes out of a book by Patricia E. Ruberton, Memorializing the Narragansett's Placemaking and Memory Keeping in the Aftermath of Detribalization. And this was in Archaeology's Placemaking, Monuments, Memories, and Engagement in Native North America, which was published in 2008. It focused on two monuments, one for Canonicus, which was here in Providence, but another one that was down at Fort NENACW. And the one for Canonicus here in Providence came out of the excitement of what happened with the monument down in Fort NENACW. Now, it's very interesting. If you notice here, at first it starts off in a space that's called North Burial Ground. That's where the monument originally was, right on the east side, if you're going up towards Kentucky. As you can see the picture here, I'll just read the caption underneath. Photographs of the event indeed show a sizable gathering. Although many of the faces are difficult to decipher, the overwhelming majority are white. The only Narragansetts identified in the program were Moses Prophet, who had the dubious honor of unveiling the monument, and a little girl named Annie Thomas, who presented a bouquet of flowers to the Narragansett Indian Affairs Commission, National Rhode Island Historical Society. Now, let's see, why do they have this monument? Why? Yes, 1883. Now, why are they giving this monument? Why are they honoring Canonicus? Well, let's hear from their own words. I'm sorry. The erection of boulder memorials to distinguished Indian sachems who have left an impress on Rhode Island history has long been a favorite idea with some of our most earnest Rhode Island historical writers, but thus far it has been but rarely realized. The interest in Indian affairs, growing out of the late formal dissolution of the Narragansett tribe of Indians, has led to an additional realization in the erection and dedication of this memorial. So they're going to honor Canonicus right after they just dissolved his tribe. This is the mindset of European colonization at this time period. We just did away with your tribe, so now we'll honor your chief with this rock. And where did they get the rock from? Well, nature, not art. So it wasn't even like an artistic art. It was rock. It was a rock that they found. Nature, not art, fashioned this stone, as it did the character of him whose name it bears. So look, don't you just, what do our people say? The European, they kind of spoke with a forked tongue. So all nature fashioned this art, just like it fashioned the chief that we're honoring with this rock that we found. I mean, I think they literally found it after they were digging something up. We gaze with admiration upon the finely wrought marble and the cut and polished granite the skillful hand of the artisan has erected all around in the memory of civilized man. But many a visitor to these sacred grounds will pass those elaborate designs by unheeded and stop before this boulder, touched by its simplicity and the harmony of its surroundings. So really, the rock is meant to show the savagery of the Indian, juxtaposed against the cut marble and the artistic designs of the civilized European that's around them. And if you go to North Burial Ground, I show a picture later on, you can see an example of exactly what they're talking about. And of course, there weren't really any Indians there. They made a gentleman named Moses Prophet show up to unveil it, and a little Indian girl gave a bouquet of flowers to the Commissioner for Rhode Island Indian Affairs. Eventually, somehow, some way, that rock ended up in a space called Canonicus Square. There's no written documentation indicating exactly where the monument was removed from North Burial Ground that has been found in the archives. Oral accounts and circumstantial evidence suggest that it was moved sometime in the 80s when some local business owners spearheaded an initiative to have the boulder relocated. It was relocated to a place that bore its name. The Canonicus Monument was envisioned as a centerpiece for the area's economic recovery. Now, if you recall, it was initially a North Burial Ground all the way up in the Meshasek territories. Now it's kind of at the meeting space of Assapompsett, Mashipog, and Noodle-Conkedin. And they took it because they wanted to revitalize another area. So they didn't take it because it was more honoring to the Indian populations. They took it because they figured it would bring them more money. Once again, the same mindset continuing. And moved it out of where it was placed to this new space. Because they used to call this Canonicus.
You couldn't get another rock.
Exactly. They needed that one, and they needed it for money. This is what it looked like.
It's not there now, is it? I know it's like, it was there and then, and I came back up and so it was like, I know that.
It's not there.
Where is it? Well, here, let's see.
This is what that space looks like. That's where the rock would have been.
Yeah.
This is Central High School next to it.
There.
You can see where the Citizens Bank is, the new PCTA. So that is Canonicus Square, and that's where the rock sat. So what happened? Well, the circumstances surrounding his disappearance are a mystery. Though many suspect that it was the victim of a traffic accident or possibly foul play about 10 years ago. Individuals from several municipal agencies have searched in vain for the former monument. A few have campaigned to have a replica made and placed in the monument's original field of memory in the historical cemetery or in a redesigned Canonicus Square. No one knows what happened to the rock.
So
It
it
just
was there, how
disappeared.
long ago was there? 96?
I want to say this is probably around 98,
1998?
1998. So the
Didn't
rock
say it was
disappears,
1998.
the other rock gets blown up accidentally, the Indian trails get paved over.
I remember when they put it there, but I don't remember where I was living at the time. I was up here and doing stuff. Interesting, but I can't remember. And then I came up and I was like, oh, it's not there.
Well, we ride by this space all the time. Probably most of us had no idea that it was called Canonicus Square.
No idea.
And I've been trying to get into that history as well. For some reason, our family were meeting in that area in like the early 1900s, late 1800s. I'm trying to find out why. And they were definitely Indians, call them Canonicus Square. So something happened there. Enough of them, someone to take the rock and no one to know what happened to it. So it's just craziness. Just how they continue, the colonial mindset is still there. This is in 98. Stuff like this is still happening in 98.
So it was put there in 1988.
No, it was disappeared in
That's when it
98.
disappeared.
Yes.
But that space is original to the meeting.
Yeah, I know that.
Yes,
I
before
remember
that.
I remember when they put it there.
Private collection.
Later, right?
Like when they
Since someone's
first
fault.
put it there?
Okay, I see citizens.
Oh,
Sometime in the 1980s.
Ah.
So in the 80s, it was moved out of the cemetery to over there.
In the 80s?
Yes. And then by 98, it was gone. So that's Canonicus Square. Once again, these are things that are even impacting to today. This is a contemporary place of Canonicus Square, and most of us don't know it's Canonicus Square, and a lot of us don't know that there was a monument to Canonicus that was there. The last piece I want to just focus on, and this is staying right in that realm of Meshasek. Once again, just because of my particular lines, this is Uncle Ed. He lived right on the east side, in the University Heights area. I know, if you know Donald 3 Bear Fisher, he knew him. So that's the type of connection that's going on. And when I talk to family, older family, they say everyone used to think he was crazy because he walked around with the big headdress on. Everywhere. He'd be in full regalia, just walking up and down the streets. I read one article, someone had reported to the police that they thought they had a nightmare or something. They were out walking early in the morning, like 5:30, going somewhere. And they said an Indian just came out of the shadows and walked by them and like greeted them or something. And they called like to report it. And it was just Uncle Ed going down to teach at RISD. So once again, as they're honoring and memorializing the dissolution of the Narragansett Indian tribe, full-blood chief living up here on the east side in Providence. Right there. Since he moved up off of the reservation. And 6 generations after him, still up here right in these areas. So once again, I bring back to the point, why did they come back up here if the natural areas that they were down where the reservation lands are now? Well, of course, because they were from up this area. The Indians were from everywhere. And as I've spoken to the family, they say, yeah, we were from up this way. We got pushed down there during colonization onto the res and all that. But we were back up this way. That's why everyone came back up. So he was born on September 18th, 1865 in Charleston, down on the res. He was the son of Chief Brister Michael and Mary Champlin Michael. He was a sachem and a medicine man, and he was one of the last full-blood chiefs. He lived right on the east side of Providence and passed away June 12, 1949 in Providence. This gentleman here has too much African blood to be real Indians anymore. It just shows you the games that they were playing, because how would you mistake the gentleman here for an African? So what you're going to see, and if you notice, his headdress is not our headdress. You're going to notice that a lot of the Indians stopped to dress more like the Northern Plains styles, because those are the ones that are in all the westerns at the time. They just conquered the West. They did all of that sort of stuff. So everyone, television, photograph, everyone's thinking, oh, that's what an Indian looks like. So now our people around here are having to unite as a pan-Indian movement, and then a lot of times adopt Northern Plains styles, so that in the eyes of the people around here, who in their mind, you guys aren't real Indians, you guys are Africans. Well, you guys don't look like Indians. You guys don't even dress like Indians. So now you have to start adopting a lot of the Indian dress, so that the ones around here will look at you like you're a real Indian. And this is where a lot of that issue comes in for our people. And this is why you see a lot of it still to this day in this area, a lot of the Northern Plains culture of regalia being utilized. It came out of this time of having to prove to these other people judging you that you're real enough to be an Indian. So if you're going to be a real Indian, then you need to have the real Indian headdress. And you need to wear the real Indian clothes. And you have to be a certain complexion, and your face has to be a certain... All of that is coming out of this the whole process of assimilation that went on, that was telling people what an Indian is supposed to be and what an Indian isn't supposed to be. And really it was just a divide. Because as we move on, and the other thing, it consisted of various New England area chiefs, and they were politically involved. Because as we look at some of the other pictures of the phenotypes of the Indians that were in this area, people have always looked diverse. They've always come in different complexions, different hairstyles, different types of nose. That's what a New England Indian is. When Verrazano got here, he said, first of all, that he went to Narragansett Bay, and he had Poconoke's and Narragansett between there. He said that they were some of the best looking Indians that he had come across his voyages, and I would highly agree with his assessment there. And then he said that our complexions,
like out in the water.
well, you floating up and seeing different villages.
The other Indian ones are cute? Is that what you said?
Well, we were just very nice looking people. Say that.
What ones are cute?
But he said that their complexions varied from fair skin like the European to tawny, to a rich brown. So especially here in New England, there was always this diversity of skin tones and complexions. So the notion that because she's that color, she must have had a white ancestor, and because he's this color, he must have had an African ancestor is absurd. There weren't that many Africans that were brought here to populate every single Indian tribe in New England. Every single Indian tribe in New England was dominated by Africans when they were less than 400,000 and most of them were down south. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So there's actually an institute up in Albany, New York called the New Amsterdam Institute. And they have a illustration right up on their website. It's in the New York Digital Archives. And it shows two Indians walking and they look Negro. And it says that this is a depiction of the New Netherlands Indians. Now, New Netherlands was the Dutch colony before the English got here that stretched from Delaware up to Cape Cod. But it says that in Rhode Island, and I want to say, well, in Rhode Island, they just had one remote outpost, and we know that's why that was. People weren't very nice people during that time, so you weren't going to be able to have an outpost in our area. But the Dutch were even depicting that our people look how our people look. So the pictures like this are very good because it teaches us to undo what we've been trained to think in terms of how an Indian's supposed to look. They look how they look based upon the regions that they're in. And it seems, especially going down on the coast, East Coast and into the Caribbean, a lot of them had a Negroid look to them. A lot of them just did. Darker skinned, kinkier hair, but varying in complexion and tone and all of that sort of stuff. And as you can see, it carries on with our people to this day. Because you got all, I mean, they're running the gamut right there. But this was the powwow for the Algonquin Indian Council. It was held at Chief Perry's farm, which I believe is in Johnston right now. Definitely in that area behind New Continent. There's a hill over there called, well, in our language it's called Satamachet, but it translates to Stony Hill. And you all familiar with the Tandy Leather in Johnston? Yeah. And then it's just this big hill that goes behind it, right? When you get to the top of the hill, the BJ's is up there. Next time you're up there, just look at what the name of the shopping plaza is. Stony Hill Shopping Plaza. And if you notice, there's this whole section of it that's just fenced off and there's nothing going on the other side of that. Well, that was Satamachet. That's where we used to get our soapstone for our pipes and all that. And I believe that this picture was taken up there because there's a space that looks very much like this if they left the brush behind it. But once again, these are one of the spaces, and Satamachet, from my understanding, was the space where all of the chiefs from the Narragansetts would meet when they needed to discuss business for the nation. And that's up here in Johnston, not down in South County regions. So once again, our people were all over, and there were several different chiefs from several different tribes. I believe this gentleman here might be a Nipmuc chief, I'm not sure. But lots of different people. This is all part of that pan-Indian movement that was going on, us coming together because there were so few of us, we were so scattered, we were so colonized, we had to come together, we couldn't do the separate tribal things. Another picture, these are different chiefs. So standing, you have Chief Michaels on the left. Next name is Ethel Steppo. Next to her is Nellie Onsley, which is also Walmsley, so many different names that they were spelled. The next one they put unknown, but that's the chief with the headdress there. Next to there is Squaw Sage Eunice Perry, and she was Chief something. Next to there is Alfred C.A. Perry. Then you have Miss Manning, and then you have Chief Onsley, who was Ernest's father. And then C.A. you have Chief Nichols. The one in between, it was illegible. And then next to them is Chief Reverend Leroy Perry, who was from the Pocasset, who was considered the supreme chief of the Wampanoag Nation at that time.
Where is that?
This is in Providence somewhere. See, a lot of this stuff was happening in Providence. That's really what the point I'm making by showing this. Even into the 1900s, early to mid 1900s, the epicenter was up here in Providence. This is where the Indian stuff was moving and shaking. Yes, the reservation was down in South County, but that was the Narragansett Reservation. Up here, as had always been, you had interactions of Nipmucs, Narragansetts, Poconoquets, Pocasset, same thing that had been going on before the Europeans got here, still going on into the early and mid 1900s in the same space that it was going on back then. And so many different chiefs, so many different complexions, so many different phenotypes. Our people are so diverse and such a beautiful people, and the pictures show it. And then just one more picture. I got this one actually out of the University of Illinois Archives. It's the Council of Algonquin Indians. It was taken December 13th, 1923. The description: Council of the New England Tribes of the Algonquin Nation in Providence, Rhode Island. The names listed on the back of the photograph include Little Bear, Governor Sakpasan, Lone Wolf, Strong Wolf, Joseph Neptune, Charlie Daylight, and Chief Nonsuch.
Yeah, there's somebody from NENACW, I think. I don't know. That's a good Indian name, yeah.
The original print has got some information, IDs. It's at the University of Illinois archives. I was able to just download it, but I wanted to make sure the same thing. And once again, here in Providence. Here in Providence. So Providence has had this phenomenal indigenous legacy that has impacted the whole region, and it's so seldom spoken about. It's so seldom spoken about. This is just in the Providence Journal, a picture from the powwow they had. Uncle Ed's in there. They're doing all of the things that they do. Narragansett Tribe of Indians opens first annual powwow on ball grounds. It's at Sunasup. Let's see if I can read it. I have a computer right now. Sana. I think that's somewhere, because I know they used to meet in the Cranston area where Garden City is. That was a meeting space over there. I heard they used to have powwows over there. They used to powwow in all these different places. And from what I actually understand, a lot of the...
Powwow like in Victor's somewhere, didn't it?
we were all over the place.
I was a little girl.
Everywhere.
We were all over the place. You're not just going to powwow, you know, especially if we're on foot. That powwow is 20 miles away. No. We just do it right here. We just, you know, we just. But we were all over the place. I mean, we were all over the place. We were all over the place. So, what became of Sunset Cottage? Because he lived at 91 Bate Street on the east side, and he passed away in 1949. And lo and behold, this place was built in 1969. Now, I'll tell you a very funny story. I was speaking at a function at the old steakhouse for Riska. There's me, a poet by the name of Christopher Johnson, and one other person. It might have been Loren who was there. I'm not sure. I think Loren Spears was there with me. But we were talking, and I had run down my, my lineage and all that when I was doing my little talk. So after everyone, shaking and talking hands, and this professor from the somewhere at Brown comes over. And she starts kind of like quizzing me to see if I'm really, so you're such and such. So yeah, this is such and such uncle. And your grandfather was, Mr. Michael. Oh, yeah, Mr. Michael. He was chief. And so I run the whole thing down. She's like, and Chief's son said, that was his son, that was my uncle. He lived right up on a thing. And she let her guard down for 1 second. And she said, I've been doing a lot of study on it. I said, he used to live at University Heights, They kind of built over that. And she said, they knocked his house down with a military tank too. And I think she saw my reaction because I felt my head kind of do that. And she said, well, it was very nice meeting you. I'm sure I'll see you around. And she took off. So, right there, that says to me that this was done on purpose. Take a look. And for some reason, everything around this space is developed, but this is fenced off and private, and no one knows why. My gut is telling me that's probably where Chief Sunset's house was, and it's considered an Indian deed, so they can't do anything with it.
That's got to be recorded.
So they're just leaving it undeveloped. Because why would you develop everything around it, but not that?
Because the family member's not letting go.
So once again, this system is alive and well today. I took that picture yesterday.
So we have some research to do.
I have some research to do.
We can get a mind for you.
There you go. See, once we know that these spaces are there, we can then go and advocate for something. Because wait a minute, if one of the last full-blood chiefs of the Narragansett lived right there, why isn't there something showing that? Now, let's add a little bit more insult to injury, right? Because not only is that there, and there's no acknowledgement that he lived there, but we know he passed away in Providence, right? So if he passed away in Providence on the east side, most likely he's buried, and of course he is in North Burial Ground. Now this is where the original Canonicus monument was at, right? And they talked about the boulder being juxtaposed against the carved marble and the artisan and all that. And indeed, they have those types of structures in there. Lots of these. That was just one I snapped when I was riding out today. But all of these sorts of, I mean, I saw a marble tomb up out of the ground, like literally a marble tomb. So these sorts of structures are there. And you would imagine that the last full-blood chief, or one of the last full-blood chiefs of the Narragansetts, would get some sort of honor or distinction like this, right? That's what we would think, it was chief. But of course not, because we're adding injury to insult to injury. He's buried in the potter's field.
Can't have a stone.
He's buried in the potter's field. Not only is he buried in the potter's field, but the potter's field is across from the cemetery, across a little river. So it's actually separated. So it's not even really a part of the cemetery. The potter's field is across the river from the cemetery. And it's smaller. I think it might be the Mashasset going up, but it's smaller now. But it's across. You have to take a little bridge across to get to it. And if you read this stone, it says this was erected in the year 1964 in memory of deceased persons removed from old free ground sections in the North Burial Ground and re-entered here. So he wasn't even originally buried there. So they moved all of the people that were in the free section that were poor, that couldn't afford, and dumped them over on the other side of the river from the cemetery and gave them all a little stone with a number in it. And from what I've been seeing, I'm willing to bet that a lot of those people are probably just Indians that they're not even wanting to, because they were labeling a lot of us paupers and colored folk and all of that sort of stuff back then.
So who has the records with those numbers?
Gail Bell gave it to me. I have to get it back again because she gave it to me on a disc. She gave me the hard copies and then she gave me a disc and then the disc got snapped. So, but it's not hard to find.
Yeah.
You just look up the name and you can find the plot and all that. But the point being, one of the last full-blood chiefs of the Narragansett Indian tribe and a medicine man, one of the founders of the Algonquin Indian Council, is buried in a potter's field in Providence with absolutely nothing there at all acknowledging that he even existed. So the legacy of Providence is continuing even to this day with colonization, but also with the fact that there still remains and has always been a tremendously powerful Indian presence here in Providence, despite the fact that they won't talk about it. Tremendously powerful presence here in Providence. So what's next, right? Because that's kind of a sour note to end everything on, right? They took Chief Sunset's land, he's in the potter's field. They gave Canonicus a rock because they did away with the tribe and then someone stole the rock. That's not really a great way to kind of end our discussion. And we never want to leave on a negative note. So the positive note is this initiative that PCI is partnering with the Providence Foundation on, called the Meshanticket Initiative. And Meshanticket is, in our language, means the place of many trees. It pretty much ran from northern parts of what is now Coventry up until Woonsocket area where they called it Meshanticonic. But the same general area. Moshasek, all of these spaces, Providence, all of that were pretty much in the Meshanticket area. And what it is a comprehensive cultural placemaking project that will enhance and develop new infrastructure to support the Greater Providence's cultural tourism sector. Once again, arguing that culture is our greatest untapped resource, what we're saying from an economic standpoint is Rhode Island. Why don't you stop pitching that we're the home of the King Philip's War? Isn't that a narrative that's unique, that might actually catch someone's attention?
No, they don't want to be doing anything.
So what's really going on here? And that's why we're attacking this from an economic standpoint. We're saying, look, you're missing out on lots of money because I can guarantee you that people would want to come here and see the seat of the Massasoit, where the King Philip's War was launched from. Would want to go and see a monument to one of the last full-blood chiefs of the Narragansett on the east side. Would want to go to Nunnaconquet Hill if there was a statue up there of my Antinomy like this overlooking the city, to see what that's like and take pictures with it. We are, indigenous culture and history in this state is the key to what Rhode Island's trying to achieve in terms of creating an international narrative that boosts its cultural tourism sector, but they don't want to share that story. So instead, you get the mansions, and those are beautiful, and you get the Roger Williams story, and that's great. But after you've seen the mansions so many times, after you've heard the Roger Williams story so many times, then what? So it can be a tremendous element for cultural tourism. This initiative, we also believe, will serve as a testament to the state's indigenous past that acknowledges these communities as a thriving part of the vibrant fabric of Rhode Island's living culture, because so many times they like to take us and put us in a history book. They want to talk about Indians in Providence back when Roger Williams took it from chess. Can't do that thing anywhere else but there, so I have to figure out how to get there. And I will save my money, I will make my plans, I will build my experience around being able to engage with that. We're saying that's what Rhode Island has if they embrace their indigenous heritage. And ultimately what we believe is that by embracing the indigenous heritage, you set the foundation for people to want to know about the other heritages that are here. So if we get someone in town to go see the seat of the Massasoit and New Continent on a Saturday, you mean to tell me that they wouldn't stop by the Cape Verdean Festival on Sunday if it was going on? Of course they would. But how do we even get them here in the first place so that they can have that experience? And we're saying it's our indigenous history. And this is ultimately PCI's flagship project to initiate a statewide Southern New England Pre-Colonial Memory Initiative, which is an international designation very similar to a UNESCO World Sites of Conscious status. A World Heritage of Humanity status, where you're on an international register, people know about you, and literally people are flying in from all over the world. There you go. It's a little bit more contemporary. It doesn't have as many development restrictions. We were ultimately looking at it for the Providence River. But if you get that sort of Heritage of Humanity site, then you can't do any development around the river. You know the city's not going for that. So what we're saying is, let's go for this Southern New England Pre-Colonial Memory Initiative around the King Philip's War, and let's make it a statewide initiative. So if we've got Mashantucket up here in the greater Providence area, well, right across the bay, they have a gentleman over there who started the Solms Heritage Project. So Mashantucket should be linking up with Solms, and then PCI wants to go down to the South County region and say, okay, what should the name of the initiative be down here, and how do we model it around the indigenous experience that's down there? Because I'm sure I shared it. I've been sharing it with women colleagues that I know, that there was a woman chief named Quayapin, or Magnus, who had a fort down in South County, who all of the refugees, after they were attacked in the Great Swamp Massacre, ran to her fort, and then she went north to Nitsitchuk and died in battle up there, trying to get supplies for the people who survived. That's a warrior right there. And she was a woman, and how many of y'all were even aware that there were women chiefs around, or that we had so many of them?
That was new to me too last time. I thought that was a problem. Because history tells you something different. It's
So
God.
that's who's writing the history that has no value for it.
Are you telling me that women over in Europe, Australia, anywhere, looking to engage with stories about empowered women wouldn't fly to Rhode Island to go and visit that fort if it was redeveloped and it was like a tourism? Of course they would. So we've got everything we need right here if we just decide to agree with the fact that we have everything we need and then simply tell the story, right? So that's ultimately what this Mashantucket initiative is all about. Like I said, we're definitely partnered with the Providence Foundation, and as the weeks and the months roll along, you'll definitely be hearing more about it. But the whole goal is to identify these spaces like I just did in this presentation today, and then see what we need to do to help cultivate and develop those to not only tell our story and be visible, because the big issue I have with the city right now is if you don't know there's any Indians here, then you don't know there's any Indians here. We have that new mural that just went up, and that's cool, that's a part of it, but we need more. We need more. It's just a great way to really put the city and the state on the map. And that's the Mashantucket initiative.
Thank you.
So just closing it out, once again, just a juxtaposition. I really don't see much difference between our people back then and now. I'm seeing right here what Verrazano talked about when he said the fair skin like the Europeans. And then I'm also seeing some individuals in the black who have the Tony Brown complexion. I don't, other than the fact that the fashion's a little bit different because of the times, I don't really see much of a difference. And once again, that picture right there is taken right here in Providence. So the overall point being, Providence has a tremendous, tremendous Indigenous legacy and relationship. And it's our goal, I think, as the ones who are up here interacting with these communities, interacting with all of these people, so many new people coming into the area. It's our job to make sure that they're aware of that. And this presentation is just my humble way of trying to initiate that dialogue and that conversation. So that's my ramblings. Thank you for your time this evening. Any questions now that I know
No,
you
I
asked
just
them?
wanted to share, because before coming back home, we lived in San Francisco.